Today on Education Forum, Children's Education, Theory of Mind.
What do you think is inside this bag? Chocolate? Okay, look inside. Open it up.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, cars! Cars!
Wow, were you surprised to see that? Because you thought chocolate was inside?
I always wanted my birthday to come.
Okay. Now, if Grandma were to come over right now, and we were to do the same thing, we were to hide these cards in here, and we said, Grandma.
From the studio in the College of Education and Health Professions at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, this is Education Forum with your host, Dr. Jeffrey Conklin. Welcome to the Education Forum. I'm Jeff Conklin. In a recent discussion with some colleagues, we were talking about the concept of theory of mind in children's cognitive development. So I thought, and I was talking with Greg about this, and we thought this would be a great topic for the next Education Forum. So we decided we'd bring it out today. So let me first introduce my guests. Sitting beside me is Dr. Burhanettin Keskin, who is an assistant professor of early childhood education here at Columbus State University. Welcome, Burhanettin.
Thank you.
Also, my co-host, Dr. Greg Blaylock, an assistant professor of special education here at Columbus State University.
Thanks, Jeff.
Welcome, Greg. To set the stage for theory of mind, I thought we'd begin by showing a short clip that demonstrates this concept. So if we can go to that video right now.
You're gonna have a tea party with Play-Doh. I wanna serve myself. Here, Sarah. No!
Well, you've probably discovered that however smart your 3-year-old is, she doesn't seem able to put herself in someone else's mental shoes, to imagine how they think and what they believe. Perhaps you thought your parenting skills were to blame, but scientists suggest that understanding other minds is a skill that may not be fully developed until a child is about 4. To learn how children's social skills evolve between about 3 and 4, researchers use something called a false belief test. What do you think's in this box? Looks fairly obvious, doesn't it? Crayons. But let me show you. I filled it full of candles. All right, now I close it up again. While you and I have been having this conversation, Snoopy has been down here, asleep. Doesn't know what we've talked about. But let's bring him into the conversation. Now I have another question for you. What do you think Snoopy will say if I ask him what's in this box? Crayons, obviously. What else could anybody possibly say? Well, watch this 3-year-old.
What do you think is inside this box? Let's open it up and see.
Candle.
Now, you can ask the child what appears to be a very simple question about that. What did you think was inside the box when you first saw it? They say, oh, I always thought that there were candles in this box. Then you can ask them about someone else. So you can ask them about Snoopy. Snoopy's been sitting here. He hasn't seen this box. He's never seen us open it up.
What does Snoopy think is inside this box?
Candle.
Children say the same thing. Snoopy will think there are candles inside of this box. And what that indicates is that the children's view of how minds work is very, very different from the view that you and I would have.
Yes. Did you see it?
In the mind of the 3-year-old, everyone sees the world much the same way. There's no difference between what I think and believe and what everyone else, including Snoopy, thinks and believes. It is, in a sense, a naive and innocent view of the world, a kind of mental Eden. And then, about 4, comes the fall from grace.
Now, if you take the 4-year-old, quite typically the 4-year-old will tell you that, as a matter of fact, he thought there were crayons in the box. And then he found out that there were candles in the box. You can ask him about Snoopy, and he'll say, oh, no, Snoopy will think that there are crayons in this box.
Great. Why will he think that?
Because it's a crayon box.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that's going to make him think they're crayons. What's really in the box?
Candle.
Right.
And then you get the 5-year-olds who are just utterly blasé and think that this is such an obvious thing, it's silly even to ask the question. What that shows is that by the time children are 4 and 5, they have a view of the mind that looks much more like our view of the mind. They understand that things can be tricky and deceptive, that you can change your mind, that things aren't always the way that they seem. And that gives them a very different vision of how the mind works and how people work.
Remember, we're sharing this. Oh, I need that. Okay, then it's my turn.
Children who pass the false belief test now understand that other people can have different beliefs, even mistaken beliefs. Some scientists suggest that this test is further evidence of innate brain circuits specialized for reading other people's minds. They call it a theory of mind mechanism.
There, I think that sets the stage a little bit. So, Burhanuddin, can you give us a definition of theory of mind?
Theory of mind is the ability to take perspective on oneself and others and understand their mental states. And when I say mental state, I'm talking about beliefs, desires, hopes, intentions.
Okay. Okay. Now, we call it a theory of mind. Why is it a theory?
Because anything about, or most of the things about mind, it's not directly observable. So it's not tangible. So it's called a theory. I don't think it's the right or perfect word to describe it. It's more like a prediction than a theory.
Okay, now when you say that, being the behaviorist I am, it's kind of like a conjecture on your part then, or others that follow this philosophy.
Yeah, I think it is a kind of an educated guess of what other people are thinking, feeling, and that kind of mental states. You are just predicting what they are thinking or feeling.
So is this a new theory then?
Not really. It is not a new theory. It is actually based on mainly the works of Piaget.
Okay.
So it's not really new, but it is becoming a very popular subject for the last decade and so.
So is this something that's widely accepted in the field of early childhood education?
Well, there are some controversies about theory of mind, how it is assessed. So even though it's a very hot topic in early childhood education, there are some very valid questions about what theory of mind and how it is assessed.
Okay. That being said, why is it important to develop a theory of mind?
Theory of mind is very important because of several reasons. For example, if you fail to develop theory of mind ability, then you will not be able to understand the intentions of others, which is a very important part of social life, especially.
Okay, but what you're basically saying to me is this is a matter of being able to take someone else's perspective, really?
Yes, but it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Because it is an ability to take perspective of others and yourself too. For example, when you are tested by using any of the theory of mind tasks, this is what's going on. They are trying to measure if you can mentally step back from current reality and go back to, let's say, 10 minutes earlier, and then take your own mental states of that point. And if you can hold these two seemingly conflicting ideas at the same time, because what you know now and what you knew 10 minutes ago were two different things. And with theory of mind ability task, they're trying to assess if you can mentally go back and take your own perspective and then see if you can predict what you knew and what you didn't know 10 minutes ago. So it is one part. And the another part is if you can take the perspective of other people as well.
All right, now, looking at that video like we did, that's a good example of that then. Can the child take the perspective of Snoopy?
Yes, this is, again, a controversial issue. But children develop this ability between the age of 3 and 5, usually around 4.
Okay.
So if the child who is being tested is around the age of 3, he or she is more likely not gonna know what the Snoopy knows.
Okay. So this would also explain possibly why children's interactions are the way they are at 3 and how there's a marked difference when they're interacting at 5.
Definitely, because
Absolutely,
yes, definitely, because they can't really, if they're at the age of 3, they cannot properly predict what is in your mind, how you are feeling, what are your intentions. So it plays a huge role in their communication.
Interestingly enough, this reminds me then of issues we see with regard to kids with autism. We talked about autism, Jeff, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And kids who have autism are, by definition, generally kids who have impairments in their social skills, have impairments in their communication skills. And one of the interesting things about kids with autism is they don't develop an understanding for irony. They don't develop an understanding for jokes, sarcasm. They're very concrete in their language abilities. Typically, that's not always the case, but typically that we see that with kids with autism. And I think about that as we're talking about theory of mind and the idea that we're talking about having this ability to not be so concrete and to actually look at somebody else and try to interpret meaning behind their gestures, behind their words, behind their actions, and so forth.
Yeah, so when Jeff asked me why theory of mind is important,
yes,
you can easily go back to the main question. What would happen if you didn't have this ability? So let's see, if someone who is unable to predict others' intention and unable to make joint attention, joint conversation, and cannot understand irony and take things literally, and if you are the person, it's more likely that you are the one with autism. So it goes back to the autism again. So that's why it is very important to develop this ability. But we got to be careful about not saying that autistic children do not have theory of mind ability. What we are talking about is developmental delay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they do develop theory of mind later, but not at the same rate like their peers.
It also I also think about this, Jeff, particularly with regard to a lot of the kids you've worked with in the past with emotional disorders and behavior disorders. And it occurs to me as I'm thinking about what we're talking about right now, the idea that many kids with behavior disorders have a skewed understanding of the intentions of others.
Oh, yes.
They see somebody else say something to them or have a certain look, and their interpretation of those words and the way it was said and the facial expression can tend to be, with many kids we seem to find, skewed in a negative sense. They misinterpret.
Very much so, and when we see that with kids with behavior disorders, it's typically learned behavior from their experiences. They've learned that, and I think that's part of what we're talking about here is maybe a conflict with theory of mind and some learning or behaviorism.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that we do think we know about theory of mind is that it involves skills and understandings that you can teach kids.
Okay.
In fact, early on, there's research that shows taking kids and doing specific tasks with them related to interpreting facial expressions, related to interpreting emotions, can tend to develop their development of theory of mind with typically developing kids more so than if you don't do that. In fact, I think there's some research that shows there's actual gender differences in the development of theory of mind very early on, based on the fact that we develop young girls very differently than we do young boys. With young girls, we talk about emotions more from a very early age. We're much more emotionally based. With boys, we tend to be more concrete in how we talk to them, more object-based. And I think there's research that shows that it just so happens we see a slight earlier development with girls early on, an early theory of mind development. I think as they get above 4 or 5, that evens out. But very early on, at about the age of 3, we see some gender differences.
Do we see that actually?
Yes. And I think it explains a lot about usually girls being good with the conversation and stuff, because usually parents are really good at talking their daughters and about feelings, about the feelings of themselves or others people. So it actually helps them to develop this ability at an early age, so which is a milestone in terms of development.
Now, you mentioned being able to interpret facial expressions.
Yes.
Is that a big part of theory of mind?
Yes, it is very big. For example, like you can think of an example. If I say, Jeff, you are very intelligent. If I do this, what I am saying actually and what I am doing are controversial, because I am saying something that you are intelligent, and with me like rolling my eyes, I'm saying the opposite of it.
Being very sarcastic.
So I'm being sarcastic, but if you didn't develop this theory of mind ability, you will go with the literal meaning of what I said and could not interpret my facial expression, my rolling my eyes, and you will end up receiving this as a compliment.
Yes, I would. And that's, as when we went back to the autism example, that would plug right in.
Yes, that's why it will make you it will make your situation very difficult when it comes to social relations, conversations, because if you can't understand irony and sarcasm, it's going to be difficult, very difficult.
Absolutely. Now, when you talk about that, isn't that again taking a perspective where you learn that facial expression is sarcasm? Isn't that again a learning type of thing through patterning?
Sometimes it is learned. If it is very tangible, then you can learn. But sometimes just based on the situation, maybe you won't get the facial expression, but you may still understand that that person is actually is using irony without having any facial expression. So that's why theory of mind is very important, because you can still, based on the situation, you can guess what that other person is thinking or what that other person is believing at that moment, which plays a huge role without the facial expressions.
Well, you know, when you say that, that's why I think this is such a great topic. As I'm working with my young grandchildren, you know, I see that there's a point where they're so literal and they take everything totally on face value. And then all of a sudden you see that jump start to occur. So
yes, I think this jump occurs usually at the age of 4. So this theory of mind ability develops between the age of 3 and 5. When they are 4 years old, usually it is the time they have a pretty much adult-like theory of mind ability. This is the point where you see the jump.
Okay, so when you talk about the jump, are we talking about when they no longer do parallel play and they start playing together?
It has a lot to do with the parallel play and other types of play, because when you really cannot predict other person's mental states, what that person is feeling and thinking, you can't really have a joint play. So you tend to play by yourself, and then the other person tends to play by himself, which brings the issue to the parallel play. But after that, when you are able to take other person's perspective, then the game, the play becomes more complicated. You can say things and then you can receive an answer and act based on that answer. So it gets more complicated and more social play.
So in other words, are we saying in order to do perhaps pretend play with another person and say, Rahanaton, you pretend to be Jeff, and I'll pretend to be you, and we'll play in that way. Then what you're suggesting is that I will have to have some developed theory of mind within me to conceptually think about that. Think about you pretending to be someone else.
That's absolutely true. Especially when you, again, think about children with autism, you will see that they are not as good when it comes to pretending as the normally developing children, because pretending involves actual perspective taking, which is basically the theory of mind ability. When I first talked about holding two seemingly conflicting ideas at the same time, what I was referring to is basically pretend. Like when you are pretending, you are holding seemingly two different ideas at the same time. For example, if I say this cup is a car, what I am doing is this. First, I have to have this understanding.
Okay.
This is a cup. And this is not a car. This is a basic understanding. So I have to know what a cup is and what a cup is not.
Okay.
And when I say this is a car, also I have to know what a car is, and what it is not. What's the function of car? So when I say this is a car, I am holding two seemingly conflicting ideas at the same time.
Absolutely.
What are the conflicting ideas? Cup being the car. Cup and car are two different things. But when I am pretending, I pretend like this is the car, even though it is not. So when I'm done with pretending, I drop this case and I say, oh, this is a cup.
Okay, okay, I got it.
And use it as what is intended to do. So that's why the pretending has a lot to do with theory of mind ability.
It sure does, yeah.
When you see children having difficulty with pretend play, you can guess that they will not do as good on the theory of mind ability as the normally developing children.
Because they're not quite there yet.
Yes.
Okay, I think this is great. We're moving right along. I think this is a good place to take a break. So you're watching the Education Forum.
COEHP TV brings you programming from the faculty, students, and staff in the College of Education and Health Professions. Learn more about our programs, admissions, initiatives, and other informative events by tuning into our webcast presented live from the studio located in Jordan Hall on COEHP TV. You're watching COEHP TV.
Now is the right time to achieve your professional goals. Quality graduate studies at Columbus State University give you the cutting-edge skills to make a difference in your profession. At Columbus State, we provide services to meet your needs. Join us in graduate studies in the College of Education and Health Professions. Wherever you are, Columbus State.
We're back on the Education Forum with my guest, Dr. Burhanettin Keskin, and today we're talking about theory of mind. And just before we went to the break, we were talking a little bit about children being able to take two conflicting theories in their head and be able to deal with them. And what this brought to mind while we were at the break, I was thinking, this has to do with sharing as well, doesn't it, when we talk about theory of mind and perspective taking and how we can force children to share when they're not there yet, but it doesn't really take. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, because theory of mind is kind of an umbrella term
Okay.
for perspective taking. So perspective taking has many components. Like one of them is like a physical perspective taking. That means I put myself into your shoes and then try to see if I can see what you can physically see. Another type of perspective taking is cognitive perspective taking. I can put myself into your shoes and then see or predict what you are thinking, what you know and what you don't know. The last one is the ability to take someone else's perspective and then see what they feel and their emotional stage. Okay. So when we talk about like sharing and giving, which comes to this empathy, being able to take other person's perspective and predict what they are feeling. Okay. So if I am unable to predict the other person's emotional stage, if that person is sad or happy, if I don't share this, what that other person will feel, then I don't have a lot of information to keep going, and I will probably ignore your emotional states because I have no idea what you are thinking or what are your feelings. So I will tend to live in my world and then you will tend to live in yours. So.
Okay. Well, you know, and what brought this to mind is I just spent a week with my granddaughter who's 3 years old. And I also had my other granddaughter who was 4 years old. And, you know, we forced them to share. And it's very painful for both of them.
Definitely.
You know, I can share for 2 seconds my toy, but after that, I want it back.
That's why I think it is very important to educate people about the developmental stages of children. Otherwise, you will try to force them into something that they are not ready for, like trying to force children who are at the age of like 3, 4, or 5, it is not a good match really, because what you are doing is one person being able to take other person's perspective, and then the other one has no idea about the other person's mental state. But if you don't force it, if you encourage it, that's a different story. Then it brings us to the issue of learning from others, which is a very good thing. Like Vygotsky's DPD, you know, if you match with someone who is more skilled or adult, then you tend to learn from them. But of course, if the parents who do not know anything about these developmental stages, they tend to force them.
They certainly do.
And it backfires, it doesn't work. But if you encourage them to play together, and they have a lot to learn from one another.
Okay. Well, you know, and as I watch them, I keep thinking, you know, they're going to learn this. They're going to learn this because we're encouraging it, and you know, and you assume children have empathy, but they're just not there yet.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, it reminds me just why we do a lot of what we do in early childhood-based programs. So much of our instruction with very young kids is having them play together and just giving them opportunities to do both parallel play and encouraging them to do more interactive play, more pretend play, and that sort of thing. I think this is a great example of why we do that sort of thing. To somebody on the outside, it might look like, well, you're just having kids in a room play together. How is that educational?
Right.
How is that teaching them language skills? How is that teaching them other cognitive skills? And I think this is a great answer, one of many to that.
Yes.
Also,
you know,
go ahead.
It reminds me, or I guess one of the things I struggle with regard to theory of mind, and of course, I think you mentioned at the beginning of the hour that it is just a theory, and it's not something that is universally accepted by any means. In fact, there's some controversy related to it. I'm wondering if you can talk to some of the controversy related to it. So far, we've talked about it. It just seems like, well, this is obvious. Why wouldn't anybody buy into the theory of mind model? Can you speak a bit to the surrounding controversy?
One of the biggest issue about the theory of mind ability is the way it is assessed, because almost anything about mind is not observable. So what we are doing actually is guessing or predicting what is in the other person's mind. And the tasks that are designed to measure theory of mind abilities relies heavily on your verbal ability. So if you can express what you are thinking, then you will be able to pass the test. But it doesn't mean that, because there is a problem here. I may know about other person's mental states, but if I don't have the language ability to express myself, then I may easily fail the task, even though I can easily take other person's perspective. So it might be a language issue, or another issue is memory. In many tasks, they ask about like if the child remembers his or her mental state, which was 10 minutes ago, not the current mental state, but the mental state of 10 minutes earlier. So if you do not have a good memory, then you will easily fail this task, even though you are able to take your own perspective. But so it is a language issue, it might be a memory issue.
I think even with regard to it being perhaps a language issue, when I was watching the video at the very beginning of this broadcast, one of the things that occurred to my mind was, getting back to the video, one of the first things we saw was the narrator of the video with a box of what looked like crayons, right? Ask the kid what's inside the box. The kid guesses it must be crayons. Shows that it's in fact candles, birthday cake candles, and then closes it back up, and later on asks the kid, what do you think is in that box? Candles. And what did you think before was in that box? And the kid still responds, candles.
Yes.
One of the things that occurs to me with regard to that is, I wonder that at that kid's language developmental level, very early on in life, perhaps it's background knowledge with regard to the purpose of language. Imagine very young kids, their interactions with others, primarily other adults or primarily more skilled language users, are focused around labeling. What is this? This is a cup. What is this? It's a pen. And when kids misuse labels, parents correct them. When they overgeneralize words, parents correct them. And so kids, I could imagine that up to 2, 3 years old, kids begin to understand that, well, if I use the wrong language, you'll correct me, and then I'll use the right language, and that's the right label. And that's the purpose of interaction. So getting back to this kid in the crayon box, I wonder if it's not so much lack of theory of mind development, but simply the kid thinking, well, you told me it was candles, so therefore that's the right answer. So no matter what I think I thought 10 minutes ago, I'm going to give you the right answer, because that's the purpose of our interaction, is for me to please you with the right answer.
Sure. Also, another point to make, when you look at that video clip, you see there's a Snoopy, the dog, and then the reporter asks, what do you think the Snoopy will say about the content of the box? But Snoopy is a very famous character in children's life. So the child might think like, oh, Snoopy, he knows more than I do, so he might get it right at the first time. I didn't, but he's a famous guy, you know, he can get it right. So we don't really know what is going on in that person's mind. What we rely heavily on is what that child is saying, which may not be parallel to what that child actually knows.
Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely. You know, I wonder how this might be related, the development of theory of mind, how it might be related to the development of so-called joint attention. Very early on, within the first year, kids typically will develop joint attention skills. Joint attention skills being the idea that we are both, as a dyad, as two people, I'm the infant, understanding that if we're talking about this pen here, you need to be looking at it, and I need to be looking at it, and we have this joint attention to this pen, and I'm going to check to make sure you're looking at this pen right here to make sure that you understand what we're talking about. It's joint attention. I wonder if the development of theory of mind is related to the development of joint attention skills.
Definitely. To me, based on what I know, if you are able to do joint attention with other people, that means that you can take other person's perspective, mental states,
right,
and which is an upper hand when it comes to developing theory of mind, because this opens the door to this type of development.
Right, so that when I know you're looking at the pen, then I can surmise as an infant, pre-3-year-old infant, I can surmise that you are focusing on the pen.
Yes.
Right? When you're looking away from the pen, I might, if I'm developed joint attention at a year, I might insist that you look at the pen. The fact that I would insist that you're going to look at the pen then suggests that I know in your mind you're not listening to me or focusing on this pen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, definitely.
So given that, then is joint attention a precursor to theory of mind development, or is the development of joint attention merely an early aspect of developing theory of mind? Do they co-develop, or does one lead to the other?
I think, to me, the joint attention leads to the theory of mind ability. It opens the door for such development, because theory of mind ability is broader than just joint attention, but it is one of the biggest aspects of theory of mind ability. So if you are to develop such attention skills, that means you are going to more likely to develop early theory of mind ability in a normal rate or an early rate.
I see, absolutely.
Yeah. And going back to the issues about the theory of mind ability, usually when I look at the articles written about this topic, I see they utilize tasks to assess theory of mind ability.
Okay.
And in this task, they ask questions to the child. They say yes or no questions. It says, do you think this baby doll knows what is in this box? If the child says yes, then you failed the task. But I think it should go a little bit more than just based on yes or no answers, because sometimes we say yes or no without knowing what we mean. And especially it is true when it comes to children. They say yes or no without thinking what they are saying. So they should. It is not a really yes or no, and then you got the ability, you didn't get the ability. It is kind of a range, other than a just score. Yes, you got the theory of mind. No, you didn't. Yeah.
Especially when you consider the fact that, and I might be wrong here, but when people are misunderstanding a question or don't understand what they're being asked, one of the ways they cover for it is to just respond in the affirmative.
Yes.
And we've all experienced that. When we're talking to somebody and they nod their head, yep,
and you failed the test.
Yes.
Oh, you're with me then.
And then they go to do it, and you realize later they had no idea what you were talking about.
Also, that's why I think it's important when you are doing research with anything involving theory of mind ability, you should never just use one task and then decide if that child has a theory of mind, for several reasons. Based on my previous research experience, I have realized that I have several type of theory of mind tests that I utilize. One child who is like around age of 4, he can pass one task and fail the other one, which gives me the idea that theory of mind is not like a flat type of ability. It has several components, and the child can be good at one component of the theory of mind but not the other one. So you got to use a variety of tasks to get the best picture of that person's ability, which is mainly not done in many research about theory of mind ability.
I was going to ask you about the research there. Is there a lot of research in theory of mind?
Yes, there are a lot of research about theory of mind. It is connected to many aspects of other development. If you make a search, you will find thousands of articles about theory of mind.
Now, how about your own research?
I have published one article about theory of mind ability and children's understanding of abstract art. Because remember at the beginning of our conversation, I said theory of mind ability is something that if you can hold two seemingly conflicting ideas at the same time, which is the case when it comes to the abstract art. In abstract art, you see some weird shapes or designs. At the beginning, it may not mean anything. But if you develop theory of mind ability, then you can take that shape and say this is the shape, but it represents something else. So two seemingly different ideas, the shape and then what it represents. And if you can hold these two concepts at the same time, that's the most important one, at the same time. If you can manipulate these two at the same time, that means you will have a better understanding of that abstract art. So it was kind of a theoretical paper, but I went beyond it. I tried to examine the understanding of children when they are exposed to abstract art. What is going on in their mind, and what are the possible explanations of what they are thinking.
I remember a previous conversation we had when you were talking about the concept of mind reading. And people misunderstood that. But that's a very important concept for you.
Yes, definitely. Mind reading is now it becomes more popular over the word theory of mind, but it involves some questions too. When you talk about mind reading, people think that, oh, I am going to look at you and then think what you are thinking. No, it's not like that. It's not fortune telling. It's not anything supernatural. When we talk about mind reading, it is mentioned in a context, social context. So something happens and then I am looking at you or thinking about you and then thinking what that person might feel or think. Trying to read your mind based on the information that's available to me in that social contact.
Did you learn how to pick up those cues, and can you interpret them to see what's going on?
Definitely. Yes. It's not like mind reading in a sense that I look at you and then say, oh, this is what you are thinking.
I'm kind of disappointed. I was hoping we could get some stock tips or something later.
Right. We'll talk later about that. I wonder what we know about the connection of theory of mind development and cognitive development in general.
To me, I think because again, from my understanding and my knowledge, both of them are not a flat type of development. Like when you might be cognitively very developed, but it doesn't mean that you can understand everything that you are supposed to do. You might be doing a really good job on one aspect of cognition and not do a good job on the other aspects of cognition, which brings us back to the autism.
Okay.
For example, we say that autistic children fail to pass theory of mind tasks, therefore they don't have theory of mind ability. Even though that's not true, they are delayed. So when you will see that children with autism, they can care for a doll or a pet, they can show compassion, they can show emotion, which is a part of the theory of mind, you know, taking the perspective of others. So that means it is not a flat set development. Even though these children, they fail to pass this test, it doesn't mean that they cannot really, they don't have any idea of the mental states of others. They do, but the task that we utilize, I don't think they are that sensitive to capture that.
Sure.
So we don't have good tests yet. We don't have good.
I mean, we
ways
have
to
some tests, but I don't think they are quite sensitive to tell us what really goes in your mind. And I don't think if there is a way, because it's all about mind.
Right.
So mind is not observable. It's very intangible. So you can do experimentation, ask a question, but you have to rely on the behavior or the answer, which may or may not be the real answer of what's going on in your head.
Because again, it's based on what you believe is occurring at that point.
Yes.
Exactly. So bottom line then, we really need to go further in our development of assessment tools or tasks or whatever we're going to use to really determine where children are in their development.
And I really don't like the like labeling against children with autism. You know, when they say like, oh, they don't have the empathy ability or cognitive perspective taking. I don't think it is entirely true. They take some sections of taking other person's perspective and thinking what they are thinking or what they are feeling. But they may not have the broader picture, but it doesn't mean that they have no idea. They do have some ideas.
It's just more atypical.
And they can't integrate it.
Yes.
Right. You know, you remind me of just in getting back to the idea of how it's connected or might be connected or related to cognitive development. When you look at kids with intellectual disabilities, who can very easily develop a strong theory of mind. They can read your signals, they can pick up on your voice cues and your gestural cues, your facial expressions very well, but yet their intellectual development, their cognitive development might be quite delayed.
You know, that's an excellent point, but I think we'll come back to that right after we take a break. You're watching the Education Forum.
State University is moving, growing, changing at a rapid pace. It's all here with the people, with the facilities that are truly among the best in the world. From academics to athletics to campus life. Come be a part of this great place. After all, it's your world, it's your life. Take part in it here at CSU.
We're back on the Education Forum. I'm your host, Jeff Conklin, and today our guest is Dr. Burhanettin Keskin, and we're talking about theory of mind. Just before we went to the break, Greg had come up with a question for Dr. Burhanettin, and I'd like to pick back up with that if we could.
You know, as we're talking, I wonder, somebody that's developed theory of mind, then are we suggesting that then they have very good social skills, that they're very adept in their social skills, would you say?
Some of the research suggested that that's the case, and that's how I knew, and until I finished my dissertation. Because in my dissertation I was trying to see if you score a high level on the theory of mind ability, are you going to have high level of social skill?
Sure.
And my result was not supporting what I was reading mainly. What I found is this: there was no correlation between high level of theory of mind ability to your social skills.
Okay.
That means just because you are able to take other person's perspective and guess what they are thinking, feeling, it doesn't turn you into a social being.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
You can easily, there's a couple things you can do with this information, or you not do. One of them, you can use this information. If you know other person's perspective and what they are thinking and feeling, you can use that information to be socially more adaptable, so you can use this information to be popular. So you can be popular by using this information. Or you can still know this information but decide not to do anything with it, and as a result there won't be any correlation between what you know and what your social skills are. There will be no correlation. So if you choose to ignore it, you may know something, it doesn't mean that you are going to act upon it. Another possibility is the reverse. For example, I may know what is going on in your mind. If I know it, I can use it against you, and I can use it to deceive you, trick you. So at the end, I may have actually the opposite thing going on. I may have a high level of theory of mind ability and low level of social skill, because if I try to deceive people and if I am being measured in terms of social skills, guess what? More likely that I am not going to score high on the social skill.
Sure.
So high level of theory of mind ability, low level of social skill. So there are mainly three things you can do with this ability. It's good to have it, but it's like with any other ability. What are you going to do with it?
You're going to use it, or you're going to use it for good, or you're going to use it for evil.
Yeah. And what this brought to mind with me is perhaps that's not the right variable to be looking at, because working with kids with behavior disorders, what we always talk about is social skills are a learned behavior, and if that behavior is not reinforced, then that behavior is not going to occur. Whether you're taking a perspective of another person or not, it's simply a matter of survival skills or the environment you grew up in, and what got reinforced and what didn't.
Yes, definitely. It has a lot of things to do with. So we have to consider that aspect of behavior too, because behavior takes place originally in your brain, and then you do it, and then you receive some comments from other people, reinforcement, punishment, and everything. It just goes together. It's not just one side that we need to be looking at.
Right. You know, and that's the thing that I'm brought back to again with the whole social skills area is, we can spend a lot of time looking at some of those tasks, trying to determine if they're related, but if that variable is a learned behavior and we don't observe it, then again,
your result may not be accurate.
Exactly.
Another thing I would like to talk about is the social factors affecting theory of mind ability, if you don't mind.
No.
We can, it is because it's an ability, you can learn it from others, but again it has to be a friendly environment to learn it, not a forced environment. So I'm not suggesting that you should put a 3 years old with a 5 years old and say, you better play.
You're going to do it, you guys.
You're going to do it, that's all. No, there are some social factors affecting this milestone development. So if you were to promote, or if you want to promote your children's theory of mind ability, if you want to make this process faster, you can use some things. For example, you can talk about the feelings with your children, especially when you're reading, and then talk about the other people's feeling. If you see someone in pain, you can say, can you tell me what that person is feeling now? Like, just elaborate about the feelings of others. This is one way of approaching it. Another way, if you have more than one child at home, like 2 or more, it is one of the best environments they can learn this ability, because when you have your own peer, you you have to talk.
Right.
You can't just
Right.
turn your back. You have to
Right.
talk. That's how the communication is the key in this developing this ability. When you talk with other people, you tend to understand and get better about predicting other people's mental states.
Okay.
So if you have siblings, that means it's more likely that you are going to develop this skill at an earlier age. Also, like parenting style, because it has an effect on this ability. You know, if
Okay.
your parents are talking about you and your feelings, or they just simply ignore your feelings, they don't listen to you, it's more likely that you are not going to develop this skill at an early age. It doesn't mean that you will not. It's
Okay.
a possibility. So I want to underline that.
So would that mean that they either wouldn't develop it as well, or they would be delayed in their developing of
It
that
depends
skill?
on the severity of the condition. If it is an extreme case, it may delay it for a longer time. And but if it is not a very severe condition, then it's going to be delayed probably 1 or more years, and then you will still have that ability, but at a late age.
Okay.
But the ability is an interesting concept, because the earlier you get, you have a more open window of time of period to exercise on that ability, which you become more skillful at it. If you do something over and over for a longer time, it's more likely that you will be better at it.
So, taking the other tact on that, though, you take those children that grow up in those deprived environments where they don't have the emotional support, or they don't learn that, then you're telling me they don't get to practice it, so they may not develop that ability, or it's going to be delayed, or even if it does develop at a later time, it won't be as developed. Does that make sense?
If it is delayed, it may get to the point where we label as normal.
Okay.
But the problem is this. Meantime, once you are rejected among your friends because you don't really relate to other people, you don't know what's going on in their mind, it's very hard to get back to the normal stage. So these children are faced with a big difficulty.
Yes, they have that deficit. Yes.
Yeah, if this deficit prevents them to be the part of the normal social life, and then once you're out of the picture, even though if you develop that skill later, it's very difficult to go back to that circle.
Because your opportunity to use it is just that much
Right, you
less.
haven't rehearsed it, you haven't practiced it, so it's not part of your behavioral repertoire.
And also, even if you know it, there are some emotions involved. You know, when you are rejected, even though you may now have the skill that's necessary to join the social conversation and stuff,
right?
But because you were rejected at one point, it's very difficult to take the initiative and then try to be socially more active. It's become quite That's why we should be very careful about promoting this ability.
Okay.
So, because once it is delayed, it is more than like, oh, that person will get it sooner
It'll
or
come
later.
around.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Okay.
there's a time period that if it is missed, it becomes way harder to get back.
Okay.
It seems to me then, once you miss it, then what you're looking at is not perhaps just working with the individual who might have a delayed theory of mind development, but the individual's communication partners. You might be working with them as well to help them understand how to scaffold for that person who's developing his theory of mind, how to interact with that person. You're working with other partners to try to interact with that individual to give them opportunities to develop a theory of mind. I would imagine that's a big piece of that.
Yes,
we certainly do that with kids with autism.
Oh, we sure do.
In schools. We not only work with social skills with kids with autism in classrooms, but we work with their classmates, their peers as well, and helping them to voice what they're thinking, helping them to try to actually take on the perspective of the kid with autism to better interpret what the individual with autism might be thinking and feeling, as well as help the person with autism understand what he or her might be thinking.
Now, Burhanuddin, can you talk a little bit more of some of the research that either you want to perform in this area or that you currently are?
Yeah. Currently, I am working on a research about theory of mind ability and moral cognition.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to do is this. I am trying to see if children with high level of theory of mind ability, will they perform at a better level or a higher level altruistic scales.
Okay.
So
okay.
that means if you have high level of theory of mind, is this going to affect your moral cognition? So right now I am collecting data on this subject, and there are some other things in my mind that I am planning to do maybe next year.
Okay, where are we going to go there? Yeah. What else you got?
And I also see the relationship with theory of mind ability and mathematics skills.
Okay.
It may seem very far away.
Yeah, it
but
does, yeah.
Yeah, but when you think about like geometry especially,
Okay.
I was this idea has come to me like recently, so I didn't really develop it quite well. But when you are looking at a paper which has geometry question on it, and when you first take a look at it, you usually do not see the answer very well, the angles and stuff. So you need to move the paper around and then look at the geometry question from a different angle, and then you can get a quite good understanding of what's going on.
Okay.
And then you can come up with the answer. But this is the case when you are taking a paper test, right? You can manipulate the paper and take the other perspective.
Right.
But if you are taking that test on a computer, good luck. What are you going to do?
Right.
You can
okay.
turn the screen up and down. You can do that. So you need to put yourself into the other side and then try to see what you will see from that perspective. So which will, I think, enable you to solve especially geometric questions about geometry very well. So I'm trying to see if these are related, or if you train someone on this theory of mind ability, is it going to increase their score on geometry?
Okay.
Sure,
okay.
sure. Or
Can
how
they
might
take that perspective?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or how else might it affect their cognition, maybe related to problem-solving skills, giving them some training in developing theory of mind to a higher level. How does it relate to solving non-mathematical problems, maybe group processes, problems involving other people? We certainly see with gifted kids can be quite adept at their problem-solving skills. And it just occurs to me, I wonder what that might have to do with their own development of theory of mind.
Well, and I think that's a good question. That fits there.
I think there are a lot of things to discover in this subject, and that's why it is very popular, because this ability seems like it's connected to many aspects of development. And so people are trying to discover the true connection. So it is quite important.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Going back to the research again, like when we were talking about the pretend play and autism, and theory of mind. When I did my dissertation, one of the other results that I got was children with high level of theory of mind ability, they tend to display higher level of pretense when they are playing.
Okay.
Which backs up the idea that if you have the theory of mind ability, it's more likely that you will be joining.
You have an imagination.
Yeah, good imagination, and you can play and pretend.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, we do a lot of what we do with young infants is we encourage them to pretend play. We pretend play with them.
Yes, we do.
Back to your, this cup is a car. We'll do that with our kids or our grandchildren and help them learn to pretend play. And then I come back to what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is that helping them develop a theory of mind, or is it that they have a theory of mind developing along with that's helping improve their pretend play, or are they just coexisting and co-developing separately?
And that could very well be, again, we're reinforcing that behavior when they're playing, through smiles, through touches, and so maybe that's all we're doing is encouraging certain behaviors.
Sure. Well, behaviorists like you might think that. Absolutely.
Well, that's the only way it is.
Well, of course, we do know that in language development and social development early on, all of these factors are interwoven. That's what makes this so difficult.
Yeah, you can't
to parse out.
Yeah, it's very difficult to separate. Which comes first, which comes later. It's chicken and egg question.
Absolutely.
But what we know is, if you are good with pretending, that means it's more likely that you are going to score high on theory of mind ability.
Oh, sure. And that makes good sense. But I think it's so interwoven. You'll hear me talk about that behaviorist perspective because again, that's my foundation. But you just can't ignore what you're saying. I think you bring up some very valid points.
Right.
And I hope your research is going to continue, and maybe we can do some more with kids with behavior disorders, because I think that's an important area. We always talk about kids with autism, but I think we need to talk more about kids with behavior disorders and their lack of perspective taking. Well, I'd like to thank my guests today, Dr. Bahatanen Keskin and Dr. Gregory Blaylock, and this is the Education Forum, and I'm Jeff Conklin. The Education Forum is a production of the studio in the College of Education and Health Professions at Columbus State University, Columbus, Georgia. Executive producer, Tom Hackett. The director and chief cat herder is Michael Baltimore. Produced by Jeff Conklin with help from Greg Blaylock. Camera and sound technician, Justin Bakuti.